Hello, Fairfax Cryobank? Hi, yes, this is Aimee Snow, and I need to schedule a pickup for next week. Yes, I have an artificial insemination on Wednesday afternoon. No, I've never transported sperm before. It's my first time, so be gentle. I'll be using my car. That would be super awkward on the metro. Oh, no, I'm sure the packaging is very discreet. I'll be using a car. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll see you next week. That was the phone call that I had to start the week that could possibly change my life forever. I was 39, and I was at the end of a multi-year, multi-step process to become a single mother by choice. And I had navigated the whole gauntlet of finding a new job, buying a home, saving money, finding a sperm donor, an anonymous sperm donor, and now I just needed to pick up the sperm and have the procedure. So I really went into this with a lot of self-reflection and prayer and methodical planning. So the following week, when I drove up to Fairfax Cryobank, I was pretty somber. I definitely could feel the gravity of what the next 24 hours could possibly bring. So I walked inside, and there was a guy behind the counter, and I handed him my ID. He handed me some paperwork. And as I was filling that out, he went to the back, and then when I had finished filling it out, I looked up and he had returned. So I handed him the paperwork, he looked it over, and then he said, "Okay, you're all set." And he opened the half wall to the counter, and standing there was a 3-foot-tall cardboard box with handles on either side and a giant XY logo on both sides. And my first thought was, would I describe this as very discreet? But I didn't want to make any more poor jokes, so I just said, "Thank you." And he asked me again, how I would be transporting it, and I said, "By car." And he said, "Okay, so what you want to do is you want to take the box and you want to put it in one of the seats, preferably the front seat, and take your seatbelt and strap it in so it doesn't fall over." And about 50,000 jokes jumped in my head. And I was like, just be cool, because somehow I had this weird feeling that if I made too many jokes that they would decide I was too immature and not give me the sperm. And so I just said thank you. And so I picked up this monstrosity and I ambled out to my car, lumbering. And I get to the car and I'm hauling it into the front seat and I just start giggling. Because the first thought that came in my head was, what if I get pulled over? What if the cop thinks, I think this is a real person? And so I was like, what am I gonna say? Well, I don't know what you're talking about, officer. This is the potential father of my potential future child. I'm not gonna put him in the trunk. So luckily, I was not going far. So after a few minutes of intense traffic law obedience, I showed up at Shady Grove Fertility, and I hauled Frosty the Sperm Man out of the car, and I kind of walked in, and I'm just trying to be cool, and I go in the elevator, and of course 4 people come in after me. So I was kind of trying to lean casually on my frozen date, and I was just trying not to have an awkward conversation. So the elevator stops on the floor, I get my frozen date, and I walk in, and I walk into the Shady Grove Fertility lobby, and there were 2 other couples in there, but they were very quiet. It was like a library, and there was a woman behind the counter, and she was on the phone. So I kind of, again, lumber up to the desk, and I kind of catching my breath because it was heavy. And she got off the phone and looked up at me and smiled. And I realized that because she was sitting down and the counter was high, that she couldn't see the giant thing of sperm. So I opened my mouth to tell her why I was there, and I realized I didn't know what to say because my insemination was a few hours away, And so I wasn't there for that. So I just decided to be very blunt and say, I've got a bunch of sperm here. And like, luckily, this was just a Wednesday to her, so she was like, okay. And so she went, took the monstrosity, took it to the back. I came back a few hours later, and I had my procedure, and I embarked upon what is known in the fertility community as the 2-week wait. And that is the 2 weeks between having your fertility procedure and having your blood test to find out if you're pregnant or not. And it's widely acknowledged to be 2 of the longest weeks of your life for obvious reasons. And so, like everything with this entire process, I had done a lot of reading, and there are blogs and entire forums solely dedicated to the 2-week wait. So, as far as I could be, I felt like I was prepared. Now, a few weeks before I had my procedure, I had to go to a class at Shady Grove Fertility where they went over all of the different medications I would be taking and how to give yourself the shots and all of the fun logistical things. And when we got to the end, the nurses looked at the people gathered around the table. I think there were 3 other couples and then me by myself. And they looked at us and they said, we need to talk to you about your 2-week wait. You're gonna wanna take a pregnancy test, but we're here to strongly encourage you not to do it. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and you're not gonna get any information that you can actually trust or use. So just promise us you're not gonna do it. And we were all like, oh, we promise. But honestly, as they were saying this to me, I'm nodding. I'm thinking, yes, absolutely, that would be so dumb. Of course I'm not gonna do that. So for me, really, the first 10 days of my 2-week wait, I did relatively well. I said relatively. And so, but then it was a Sunday afternoon, and it was time for me to go grocery shopping. So this was Sunday. I was having my blood test on Thursday morning, so I had 4 days to go. And so I'm doing my grocery shopping. Everything's going great. And then I remember that I need Band-Aids. So I go to the Band-Aid aisle, I get my Band-Aids, and I'm walking out of the aisle, and then I notice I'm walking past the home pregnancy tests. And so I kind of was like, oh. And I kind of slowed down, and I looked longingly at the tests, and I stopped and picked one up just to look. And I'm reading the back, and I'm like, well, how early is early? And then I realize what I'm doing, and I put it back, and I look around, and I'm waiting for the nurses to like jump out from behind a Pampers display and be like, no, we told you no. And so I quickly grabbed my cart and finished my shopping and went home and put all the groceries away. And then I sat down, and all I could think about was a pregnancy test. And so for an hour, I sat in my quiet apartment, and I just thought about taking a pregnancy test. And I argued with myself about taking a pregnancy test, but finally after an hour, I stood up and I said aloud to myself in an empty house, okay, this is so dumb, but go and get one and stop obsessing about it because you're gonna drive yourself crazy. So I got in the car, I drove to CVS, and I bought a 2-pack because even if you're wasting money, you need to get a good deal. So I brought it home, and I took the test, and it was faintly positive. And I was like, yes, positive, yes. But it's really faint. I've never taken a pregnancy test before. This was pre-COVID, before we were all very well versed in positives and negatives. So I was like, I wonder if faint positive is a positive. Why don't I Google it? Because this is what we do now. And so I Googled it, and yes, a faint positive is a positive. So again, I was like, yes! And then I remembered my fertility medication. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, I did take fertility medication 10 days ago. I wonder how much could be in my system. Let me Google it. So I Googled the phrase, positive pregnancy test 10 days after taking Ovidrel. And let me just tell you that Google populated that search before I finished typing it. So at the very least, I'm in really good company. And so I'm reading this blog that was probably written by some blessed person on their 2-week wait that really detailed scientifically how much medicine leaves your system every 24 hours. So I get to the bottom of that blog, and I'm like, well, I still don't have an answer. I clearly have some in my system, not a lot, but some. And so, I wish somebody had warned me that this could happen if I took this pregnancy test. And so I was like, well, that's what you get. But because I realized, I have no information that I can actually use, as they told me. So then I realized that I do have information that could be useful, because now I have a baseline. And so I've got this second test, let's not waste it. So what if I took another test in, say, 3 days, or 2 days, or 3 days, yeah. And that way, the results will be a little bit more maybe accurate, because I'll have 3 more days to have the medicine out of my system, and I will be 3 days more pregnant. So I was like, that will give me a more accurate reading. And then, while I'm talking myself into things, I started really thinking about what Thursday was going to look like, because I was going to go in the morning and I was going to give a blood test, and then I was going to have to wait until lunchtime to get the results. And I was going to be at work when this happened, because if I was pregnant, I needed every second of leave. So I didn't want to take time off. So I thought, well, maybe I should take this second test to help prepare myself for what this answer is going to be, because the last thing I want to do is just dissolve into a puddle of tears in the middle of my workplace. I mean, that would be super embarrassing. So I was like, okay. So I decided I would take the second test on Thursday morning. So I woke up super early. I had the test all laid out in the bathroom. I stumble in there. I get the test all ready. I start to pee. I stick the test in. I pull it out, and I immediately can see that something's wrong with the test, because it's not absorbing. Previously, you could see it absorb up the stick and saturate the paper. No absorbing. Nothing was happening. And so I stopped peeing, because in my Googling, I learned that the best time to take a pregnancy test is in the morning, because your pee is more concentrated. So there's your fun fact for today. And I didn't want to waste this concentrated morning pee. So I'm just sitting there at 5:30 in the morning, staring at this thing that I've just peed on, holding my pee, trying to figure out what to do. And then the analytical part of my brain was like, why isn't this test working? What is stopping this from working? Is the stick the problem? Is the paper the problem? What's the problem? So I just kind of instinctively grabbed the thing that I had just peed on, because poor hygiene was the least of my problems by now. And I just kind of pulled, and it came right out of the test, and it turns out that the thing that you pee on is about that big, and you pee on about that much of it. So I thought, what if I peed on the other side of it and stuck that in so it would directly come in contact with the paper? Why don't we try it? So I started peeing again. I put the stick in. I put it in a test, saturated the paper, positive. And I was like, yes, positive. But this test is clearly defective. I could have put water on it and it may have told me that I was pregnant. It's not working. I'm trying to MacGyver this thing, and it's just not working. So I was kind of like, well, okay, again, I wish someone had warned me. And so I was like, you know what? You're getting your blood test in a few hours, just give it up. So I just gave it up, got ready, went to Shady Grove, gave my blood test, waited on pins and needles all morning. Around lunchtime, the call comes in. I take the call, I stand up, I walk into my boss's office, shut the door, and immediately burst into tears. And she's on high alert because I have shut the door. And so she was like, are you okay? Are you sick? Is someone sick? Are you dying? Is someone dying? And I realized she's just really veering off into very dark territory. And I can't get anything out except 2 words. It's good. No, it's good. it's good. And she's looking at me like, how can it possibly be good? And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, thank goodness I took all those pregnancy tests, or this would be really embarrassing. But finally, I was able to calm down enough to tell her that I was pregnant, and that is how I now have a beautiful 9-year-old son named Beckett. Thank you.